We thought he was Dad, but he was just a man stealing from the very woman who built his world. At 24, I believed every drop of sweat I shed was for my mother's comfort. My brother and I worked until our hands cracked, handing him every peso without question. We never imagined the home we thought we were saving was crumbling under his lies. The paydays always smelled the same. Dust, sweat, cigarette smoke. We'd come home from the construction site with grit in our hair, our shirts stiff with dried cement dust, our palms so raw that the creases had gone white. My brother would drop his hard hat in the corner with a dull thud, and I'd slide into the chair at the tiny kitchen table that was more splinter than wood now. Dad would already be there, leaning back, one leg crossed over the other, a cigarette between two fingers. The ceiling fan above us turned lazily, stirring the smoke into slow spirals that seemed to take their time disappearing. We'd hand him the bills without ceremony, folded, sweaty from the pocket of my work pants. He'd take them without counting, slip them into a brown envelope already lying in front of him, and tap the seal shut with two fingers, like a priest closing a book. "Your mother will get this tomorrow," he'd say, every time. No smile, no thanks, just that same flat line, like a recorded message. For years, I never questioned it. That night should have been no different, but it was. My brother's phone rang while Dad was still smoking. He glanced at the screen and stepped into the corner to answer, his back to us. I didn't think much of it until I heard his tone, softer, careful, like he was talking to someone fragile. "Hey, Ma." His voice dipped lower. I caught bits and pieces, something about the roof still leaking, lentils again for dinner, no mention of the medicine she'd said she needed weeks ago. I frowned. We sent enough for her to live well, not extravagantly but well. Repairs, groceries, bills, all of it covered. So why did her voice sound like it carried 100 pounds of worry? When my brother hung up, he avoided my eyes. That was the first twist in my gut. The next day at the site, the air was heavy with the smell of wet concrete. The scaffolding rattle, and whenever someone climbed it, a dull clank echoing through the half-finished walls. I was hauling a bag of cement when I heard my father's name carried on a low chuckle. Two men were talking just out of sight. "Saw him again last night," one said. "With her." A laugh. "Always with her." The words hooked into me like barbed wire. I followed the sound around the corner of the building. My boots crunched over loose gravel until I saw them. Not the two workers. Them I ignored. My eyes locked on my father. He was leaning against a wall in the shadow of the scaffold, one arm resting casually above the head of a young woman. She had hair so black it gleamed even in the dusty light, and she was laughing. That intimate, head-tilted kind of laugh that people don't fake. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded wad of bills I recognized by their rubber band, and slipped it into her hand. My breath caught, but it wasn't shock. Not exactly. It was the kind of cold clarity that makes your body still while your mind races. I stood there long enough to see his fingers brush her hair back from her face, a gesture I'd never seen him use on my mother. That night, lying on my bed in the cramped room we rented, I stared at the ceiling until the fan blades blurred. My brother's breathing was slow but restless. I knew he was awake. Finally I said, "Ma said the roof's still leaking." He didn't answer right away. Then, "Yeah." I turned my head toward him. "We sent enough, don't we?" He didn't look at me, just said, "Yeah." But his jaw was tight. And in that silence, I could feel the truth neither of us wanted to say out loud yet. That envelope wasn't making it to her the way we thought. From that night on, I started counting things. Not just money, but hours. The hours we broke our backs under the sun. The meals we skipped to send a little more. The years we hoped demi keys. It trusted without looking too closely. And as I counted, the numbers never added up. If you had asked me back then, I would have said we were a family built on hard work. I believed it in my bones. Before the city swallowed us, home was a small town with streets that stayed quiet after sunset, where you could smell the bread baking at dawn from 3 blocks away. We had a yard that looked bigger in memory than it ever did in person, and a kitchen that was always warm, even in winter, because my mother was always in it. She was the heartbeat of the house. Every morning she rose before the roosters, tying her hair back with the same faded ribbon, moving through the kitchen with the slow grace of someone who has done the same steps 1,000 times. Kettle on, bread sliced, eggs cracked. She'd hum softly, not to anyone in particular, just to fill the air. Dad, back then, was a man I respected. Or maybe I respected the idea of him. He worked, he provided, and when he spoke, his voice carried the kind of authority that didn't invite questions. He wasn't warm. His way of showing love was making sure the roof didn't leak and the bills were paid. At least, that's what I thought. When he got the offer to work in the city, it felt like a turning point. More money, bigger jobs, a chance to send more home to Mum so she could live easier. He said she'd stay behind to keep the home running, but I knew it was because someone had to be there for the younger siblings, for the garden, for the life we'd built. I was 17 when we left, my brother barely 15. The city didn't smell like bread in the morning. It smelled like exhaust, like hot concrete, like other people's sweat before sunrise. We rented a small 2-room space above a shop that sold plastic buckets and cheap tools. The windows faced an alley where stray dogs fought over trash. The first week, Dad laid out the rules. We worked with him on the construction sites. No question. No complaints. We handed him all our wages. He would put them in a brown envelope, write Mum's name on it, and send it home. That's how a family works, he said. And I believed him. The work was brutal. We carried sacks of cement until our shoulders went numb, mixed mortar until our wrists burned, climbed scaffoldings with steel rods balanced on our backs. The sun in the city didn't just shine. It pressed down on you like a weight. Still, there was a rhythm to it. Payday would come, we'd hand over the cash, he'd seal the envelope. Sometimes he'd place it on the table like it was sacred. I remember the first time I saw his thumb run along the flap before sealing it. I thought it was his way of making sure it stayed safe. Now, looking back, I wonder if it was just habit. The warning signs were there. Nights when he wouldn't come home until after midnight, smelling faintly of cologne. Not the cheap stuff he'd always worn, but something sharper, more expensive. The new watch on his wrist, silver catching the light, though we hadn't had any big job that month. The way he snapped when I asked if Mum had gotten the money yet. Once my brother joked, maybe he's got a second family. We laughed because it was ridiculous, or maybe because we needed it to be ridiculous. But there were good moments too, or at least moments I thought were good at the time. Working side by side with him on a tall building skeleton, the city stretching out beneath us. Hearing him tell a foreman we were hard workers. Watching him nod in approval when we carried a load without stopping. I clung to those, because when you're young, you think respect is something you earn by enduring. It's strange how memory works. That phone call from Mum, weeks ago now, is lodged in my mind like a splinter. Her voice, thin over the static, talking about the leak in the roof. The same roof Dad had promised to fix the moment we got steady pay. She didn't sound angry, just tired. Tired in a way that made me want to send her my jacket, my shoes, anything I could give. I didn't let myself dwell on it too much then, but I carried it. Like I carried the smell of Dad's new cologne in my clothes after he brushed past me. Like I carried the image of that silver watch whenever I closed my eyes. At the time, I still believed we were building something together, a future for her, for all of us. I didn't know yet that what we were really building was a lie. Dinner that night was nothing special. The same chipped plates, the same dim light bulb humming over the table, the same clink of utensils against enamel. But I remember the smell of garlic rice, the steam curling up like it was trying to escape before it burned. I remember my hands resting on the table, palms flat, the way they used to after long days mixing mortar, as if the cement dust was still there, still clinging to me. Dad sat at the head of the table as always. His posture said, "This is my house," even if the rent receipts had both my name and my brother's. He had that worn-out undershirt on, the same one from the first day we'd come to the city, back when I thought his tiredness was sacrifice, back when I still believed his discipline was love. I took a bite of rice I didn't taste and said, "I talked to Mum today." His fork paused halfway to his mouth, just for a second, but enough. He chewed, swallowed, and didn't meet my eyes. "She's still behind on bills," I added, my voice as even as I could keep it. "She says the roof is still leaking." He stabbed at the pork on his plate, shrugged. "She worries too much." My brother set down his spoon. "We send her more than enough." That's when Dad finally looked up and smiled. But it wasn't the kind of smile that warms a room. It was a slow, curling thing, a smirk, almost lazy, like he'd just heard the punchline of a joke we didn't understand. "You're just kids," he said. "Stay kids. Leave the grown-up matters to me, T." His words landed heavier than any cement block I'd ever carried. My chest tightened. I thought of Mum's voice on the phone, soft and tired, still telling me, "I'm proud of you, mijo." I thought of the mornings in the province when she'd hand us pan de sal still warm from the oven. And here was the man we'd been breaking our backs for, telling us to stay kids. My brother's fist came down hard on the table. The plates jumped. "Where's the money going, Dad?" The smirk vanished. His eyes sharpened like rebar under concrete. Cold, rigid. "Watch your mouth." We didn't speak for the rest of dinner. The sound of his chewing filled the silence like a metronome, ticking down to something inevitable. Over the next week, the air in the apartment felt different. Heavy. He didn't talk much, and when he did, it was short, clipped sentences. My brother and I started watching his movements, when he left for overtime, when he came back smelling faintly of cologne instead of dust. One Thursday night, we followed him. We stayed far enough back to blend with the crowd, the city's neon bleeding into puddles at our feet. He walked with a lighter step than I'd seen in years, almost like the younger version of himself from old family photos. He stopped at an apartment building we'd never noticed before, and a woman opened the door before he could knock. The same woman I'd seen once at the construction site, laughing with him over lunch. She kissed him like she owned him. Through the narrow window, we saw him lay an envelope on the table. Not thick, but heavy enough to slump at one end. I recognized it instantly, the kind of envelope I'd handed over countless times, still warm from my own sweat. We didn't stay long. We didn't need to. Back in our cramped room, the walls felt closer than usual. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every memory of hauling cement under the midday sun flash, heat behind my eyes, the blistered palms, the dust that stuck in my throat for hours, the way we'd laughed through the pain, because we thought we were building something for her, for us. Instead, we'd been building for this. I sat on the edge of the bed and said it out loud for the first time. He's stealing from us. My brother didn't answer right away. He just stared at the wall, jaw tight, his shadow cutting across the cracked paint like a blade. Then he said, "No, he's stealing from Mom." That was the moment something in me broke. Not like glass shattering, but like a steel cable snapping under too much weight. And in the silence that followed, the first thread of a plan started to take shape. Because love for a parent doesn't erase the need for justice. The day we left, the city was wrapped in a low, heavy mist. The kind that softens all edges and makes every sound feel farther away than it really is. I woke before the alarm, before the noise of trucks outside, before Dad's footsteps could fill the hallway. My brother was already sitting on his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the duffel bag at his feet. We didn't speak. Words felt too small for the weight of what we were about to do. I dressed in silence, jeans stiff with dried cement dust, the faded shirt Mum had mailed me last Christmas. The smell of the apartment, that stale mix of sweat, rice and damp concrete, clung to me like a warning. Dad was still asleep when we passed his room. I saw the cracked door, the shadow of his boots on the floor, and I thought of all the mornings we'd left before dawn, handing him our envelopes without question. I thought of the other door, the other apartment, the other life we'd stumbled upon, the life that was paid for in hours of our labor. By the time the sun started breaking through the fog, we were already on the bus heading south. The seats smelled faintly of gasoline and old leather, the windows fogged from the breath of strangers. The hum of the engine was a steady, low heartbeat under us. Neither of us looked back. Mum's house was smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling in strips, the front steps sagging a little more than the last time I'd seen them. But when she opened the door, her face lit up in a way that made every blister, every burn from the job sites feel almost worth it. Almost. She held us like she was afraid we'd vanish. I felt her tears dampen my shoulder. My brother didn't pull away. We told her everything. Not all at once. It came out in pieces, over cups of instant coffee at the kitchen table. The smell of it mingled with the sound of rain on the tin roof. Every detail felt heavier out loud, every mention of the envelopes, the apartment, the woman. Her hands shook as she listened, but her eyes stayed steady. She didn't curse him. She didn't even cry. She just said quietly, "I always wondered." The first weeks back felt strange, like waking up in your own bed after a long stay somewhere else. The rhythms were different here. Mornings were slow. Afternoons smelled of laundry soap and wet earth. My body ached from the absence of labor, but my mind began to breathe in ways it hadn't in years. We found work nearby. Not much, just enough to keep the roof from caving in and food on the table. And this time, every coin stayed here. In this house, in these hands. I started fixing things. The back fence, the leaky roof, the broken latch on Mom's window. With every nail I drove in, I felt something else set in place inside me, something steadier than before. But at night, when the crickets were loud and the house was quiet, I'd find myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling fan, thinking of him, of the smirk, of the words, "You're just kids." And I knew. Leaving wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of taking back what was ours. Freedom has a taste. It's not sweet, not at first. It's bitter, like the first sip of coffee you drink too fast. But with time, it lingers on your tongue in a way you start to crave. By the third month back with Mum, the bitterness was fading. The soreness in my hands from the job sites was still there, but it was ours now, work done on our own terms. Every peso went straight to her, and for the first time in years, I could see the weight lifting from her shoulders. She hummed while hanging laundry. She laughed at old TV shows again. Still, my brother and I carried a quiet fire. It started as small talk while sanding down the warped kitchen table. "What if we got him out of her life for good?" he said. I didn't look up, just kept the sandpaper moving in slow circles. "You mean for Mom's sake?" "For everyone's sake," he said. "No more lies, no more envelopes going missing." It wasn't just anger anymore. It was purpose. We began watching from a distance, not stalking, not confronting, just learning his patterns. The job sites he took, the weekends he worked late, the places he visited with her. It was easy to find cracks when you knew where to look. I took extra shifts. My brother started apprenticing with an older carpenter who taught him how to read contracts and spot legal loopholes. At night, over steaming bowls of beans and rice, we compared notes. We didn't call it a plan. Not yet. We learned how separation papers worked, how property division could be forced if you had the right evidence. We learned that if Mum filed, she could demand an audit of the money that had been sent to her over the years. If we could prove he was skimming, it could strip him bare. One Sunday, while fixing the gutter, I found an old tin box tucked behind the kitchen cupboard. Inside were letters, some mine, some my bro, others written to Mum during those years away. She had kept them all. The handwriting was younger, uneven. We'd told her about our days, our hopes, our exhaustion. Reading them made something shift inside me. We weren't just kids back then. We were men in training, breaking ourselves for a dream we didn't even get to hold. That night, I told my brother, "We do it, all the way." From then on, it was no longer vague. We pooled our savings, paid for a consultation with a lawyer 3 towns over so word wouldn't get back to Dad. The man leaned back in his chair, listening without interrupting. When we finished, he said one thing. "If you have proof, you can take everything he tried to hide from you." Proof. That became the heartbeat of every day. My brother got it first. A photo of Dad's truck outside her apartment when he was supposedly working. I got the second. A copy of a receipt for a luxury watch, bought in cash, that matched one I'd seen her wearing. Piece by piece, the picture formed. But the power shift wasn't just in the paperwork. It was in us. We were no longer 2 tired laborers handing over envelopes in silence. We were men who could dismantle what had been built on our backs. Men who understood that family didn't mean obedience. It meant protection, even from one of your own. And in the quiet moments, while the ceiling fan hummed above my bed, I realized something. I didn't want to destroy him out of revenge alone. I wanted to set Mum free. And maybe set us free too. By the end of that year, we had a folder thick enough to make any judge listen. The lawyer said one more meeting could start the process, one more push, and everything could shift. We didn't tell Mum yet, not until it was real, not until we could hand her the life she deserved without warning, the way he had taken it from her. And so we waited, steady as bricklayers, taking evidence one layer at a time. The day would come soon, and when it did, he would be the one with nowhere to stand. It was a warm afternoon when the call came. The lawyer's voice was calm, almost casual, but my hands tightened around the phone. "We're ready. If you bring your mother in tomorrow, we can file." I didn't answer right away. I just stared out the window at the dusty street, hearing the sound of hammers and saws from the job site down the road. For months, I'd dreamed of this moment, the day when the balance would finally tip. That night, my brother and I sat with Mum at the kitchen table. We'd kept the folder hidden in the bottom drawer of my dresser, wrapped in brown paper. When I slid it in front of her, she didn't touch it at first. "What is this?" she asked. "It's your way out," my brother said. Her eyes moved between us, searching for something she could trust. Slowly, she opened it, flipping through photos, receipts, copies of messages. The deeper she went, the more her hands trembled. "You've been collecting this?" she whispered. "For a year," I said. "We didn't want to tell you until it was real." She didn't cry. She didn't get angry. She just sat there, shoulders slowly rising, as if she'd been underwater for years and had finally reached the surface. The courthouse smelled of paper and polish. When she signed the first page, her pen scratched across the line with a kind of finality I'd never heard before. My brother and I stood behind her, silent. We weren't here to speak for her. We were here to make sure she never stood alone again. The confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in the parking lot outside his favorite cantina. We knew he'd be there. Friday evening, same as always. His truck was parked out front, the paint chipped along the doorframe. My brother leaned against our car, arms crossed. I walked up to the door, and when he stepped out, he froze. The years had not been kind to him. The tan lines on his arms were deep, the lines around his eyes sharper, but the arrogance was still there, until he saw me holding the envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Your notice," I said. "Mom's divorcing you. The audit's already filed. Every peso you took, you're going to have to answer for it." His laugh was small and brittle. "You think you can play grown man now?" I stepped closer, close enough to smell the cologne I'd once thought meant fatherly pride. Now it smelled like distance, like every time he'd left us standing alone on payday. "No," I said quietly. "We're not playing. You told us to stay kids, but you taught us something else instead. How to build. And we built a way out." He tried to talk then, about misunderstandings, about a little on the side, about how Mum never complained before. My brother didn't move. Neither did I. When he realized no one was defending him, he looked smaller somehow, like a structure built on rotten beams. "You're going to regret this," he muttered. I shook my head. "We already regretted wasting years trusting you. This we'll remember as the day Mom got her life back." I turned and walked away. Behind me, my brother's footsteps matched mine, steady and even. The legal process was slow. Months passed. But the outcome was exactly as the lawyer promised. The audit proved the missing money. The property split favored Mum, and his debts forced him to sell off what he'd tried to hide. When it was over, Mum moved into a small but beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood. The walls were freshly painted, the windows wide enough to let the light flood in. She planted flowers along the front path, and every morning she watered them herself. Sometimes when the three of us sat on her new porch, she'd look at me and my brother and just smile. Not because everything was perfect, but because the weight she'd carried alone for so long was now hers to share, and together we'd set it down. I kept my old work gloves on a shelf in my room, stiff and stained from those years in the other city.